Hi, my name is Junaid Ahmed and I work for The Learning Adventure. Today I will be talking about planning an outstanding educational school trip with The Learning Adventure. There are several key components that go into making a great international school trip. The most important one is that planning requires a lot of effort, and the longer in advance a trip is planned, the higher its chance of success. This gives enough time for parents, teachers, and operating staff to be able to successfully and smoothly run a trip. Broad planning is how long before the trip should you plan, and also to determine what are the flight viability options, what are the different destinations that are available for a given objective, also to determine what are key objectives and themes for that particular trip, and if there are any alternatives that the school or the teacher is willing to consider. Additionally, we also need to determine conservatively what the number of students and staff will be who will be accompanying the trip. Finally, we talk about accommodation, where it is important to know what the school is looking at in terms of accommodation options and dietary requirements. These could be, especially for Middle East schools, requirements such as halal options or other requirements such as vegetarian options if there are a lot of vegetarian students at a certain school. During this planning phase, my role is to help the teacher to understand what are the different destinations that are available, whether it's flight connections, direct flights, flight price options, visa requirements. These are all very important considerations. Additionally, we look at the assessment of appeal in terms of costs, overall costs for a certain trip, competing trips at the same school for the same dates potentially. We also try to help the teacher determine key learning objectives. For example, if there's a ski trip, the learning objectives can be pretty straightforward. But if there's a business and economics or a STEAM trip, for example, then the learning objectives can be a little more diverse. Sometimes we've seen that two different subjects or more than two subjects in a certain school come together to run a school trip. And then we also help to determine staff to teacher ratio, or rather staff to student ratio. So how many students per staff member will be required for the trip. Accommodations, it's important to understand that there will be 2, 3, or 4 students in a room sometimes. However, compromising on space is perhaps sometimes a better option for certain schools than to compromise on proximity to city center or the standard of accommodation. So in terms of hygiene, in terms of accommodation options, cleanliness, safeguarding, we work with typically 3-star and 4-star accommodations, and the prices vary differently, so we can discuss that with the school in the early planning phase. In this planning and refining the itinerary stage, we talk about different components. An itinerary should be packed, so it should be a strong itinerary, but it should not be too packed because there will be times when the kids could feel lethargic, tired, exhausted from a lot of walking, a lot of sun exposure, or just a lot of activities that overstimulate them. It should be academically relevant, but and arouse curiosity, but it should not be too academic focused, because that can also be challenging in terms of information absorption. It should obviously awaken the curiosity for a given theme. If it's a geography focused trip or a classics focused trip, for example, the goal should be that the kids should learn about that particular subject and come back revitalized to learn more about that subject when they return to their home country. It should create for them a desire to connect with the local culture and offer immersive experiences. This is very important because regardless of what itinerary, what program we have, there will always be an important consideration of local culture that we try to incorporate into each of our trips. The other consideration I think it's very important to point out is that the itinerary should be safe and practical. This simply means that when you're dealing with kids in a certain age group, the actual activities should be safe and logistically conveniently operable. Sometimes we will see that activities that adults can do simply are either too risky or too challenging, too physically exhausting, or inoperable in terms of logistics, so we shy away from them. Also, it should be efficient in terms of how the itinerary and the activities are designed. So obviously, geographic proximity, arrival times, departure times, meal planning, all of this goes into place. And another important point to understand is that from a teacher's perspective, the itinerary can be adjusted unlimited number of times before we book. So we were very proud of the fact that sometimes a teacher will go back to the drawing board 5, 6, 7 times and work with us to make sure that the itinerary is exactly what the school is looking for. After an itinerary is confirmed with the teacher or with the school, we then move on to the launching the trip to parents. Launching the trip to parents is important. Again, it should be done early enough so that parents have enough time to determine whether or not that trip is feasible in terms of their own travel arrangements, and also cost-wise if it's going to be acceptable, as a lot of times tight timeline trips require parents to shell up finances. Sometimes the school is footing the bill because they've already collected the payment from the parents in advance for a certain trip. So it's important to give enough advance notice to all the stakeholders to be able to run this successfully. It's important to know that parents will typically require an easy installment payment plan that will typically stretch out over 2 to 3 months, sometimes even more, sometimes 4 months. This is really important so that parents can split the cost of the trip into different parts. These can be 20 to 25% for each installment. Parents also deserve the right to have all information about the itinerary early on. And also they need to know deadlines, whether it's for visas, whether it's for payments, whether it's for packing, planning, requirements for the trip. These are very important considerations. The day-to-day of the actual program can be shared later on when everything is finalized, but the broad specifics or the broad itinerary should be shared with parents as soon as possible. Once the trip is confirmed in principle by the school, we send a booking form to the school or to the teacher and get it signed. This signed booking form in principle means that the school want to proceed with booking the trip, which takes us to the next step. The next step is payments. We offer payment solutions either for the school to pay directly into our bank account, or we can also offer credit card payment links. We also offer solutions for parents to be able to pay or transfer the money directly to the company. So whatever solutions work, we're able to provide those. At this stage, I think it's important to know that the passenger information form is an important factor. which helps us to collect information that must be accurate in terms of the passengers who are going on the trip. Now, there's two types of passengers who are typically going on the trip: students and staff. We always encourage teachers to work with us. We have several technologically efficient solutions that will allow the teachers to be able to collect information, passenger information from the parents of the students directly, without any manual error possibility from the teacher side. This puts the onus of the information onto the parents. The information has to be accurate in terms of names, citizenship, passport number, issuance dates of passports and expiry dates of passports, and date of birth. These are the most important critical information sets that we need in order to book the trip successfully and correctly. There have been cases in the past where information was incorrectly entered. With the help of teachers and our staff, we're able to a lot of times catch that incorrect information. However, we as a company always advise the school and the teachers to make sure that the parents are aware that they must put information in correctly, or that there may be consequences in terms of added costs, sometimes from airlines, that they will have to incur if the mistake was done by them, and that is not fixable. 2 to 4 weeks prior to a trip, we have a parents meeting that I will typically come and present at. I will travel to the school, wherever the school might be, if it's in my Middle East and North Africa region, or sometimes one of my colleagues will attend a meeting on my behalf. And so the important consideration here is that we will educate teachers and parents, as well as students if they're attending, about the do's and don'ts of a certain culture. Cultures outside of the Middle East and North Africa region can be different. This can be true for pretty much anywhere you live. Other cultures can be very strong, especially in Asia. Some of the cultures value certain characteristics differently. We also set the right expectation in terms of food, whether it's halal food, vegetarian options, or flavors. So we encourage parents to attend this and understand what kind of food the students will be having, and how to prepare for a culture shock, a bit of a culture shock, so that the kids don't feel like they are missing food from their home too much. Also, we talk about packing snacks, medication, critical documents that are important. We do an entire rundown of the activity, of the itinerary, activity by activity. This is day by day, and it goes sometimes, activity by activity. Typically in a day, you will have 2 to 3 activities, 3 meals, some snacks, and additional transportation information to and from a certain activity that we will be discussing. We also discuss in-depth packing list, because it's very critical to be appropriately packed, whether it's a sports tour, or a water sports trip, or a ski trip, or a culture trip. It's important to pack comfortably rather than fashionably. And we educate the parents and the students on this. We also share emergency details, communication policy of the school, and also our own incident policy in case there is an emergency with a certain student. We always like to be prepared and share this information in advance, because anything can happen, whether it's a natural disaster or some other critical event that may occur in a certain setting. We always like to make sure that our parents, our teachers, and staff are all on board with the safety protocols that we follow. One of the key starting points of the trip is after arriving at a certain destination, our team that has received the school group will run a mandatory trip briefing that is required for all parties to attend. This sets the tone and clear expectation again to the kids, mostly about what is acceptable and not acceptable in a certain culture, especially if there's any important challenges that kids may face and how to deal with them in advance. This avoids surprises and also makes them keen and aware of what to expect while they're out during the trip. We also make sure that the students feel comfortable collaborating with our staff. We talk about student behavior and conduct. It's very important, especially because some Asian cultures and Western cultures require a certain different kind of politeness, respect that they may not be used to from back home. We also talk about medical incidents and protocol again to make sure that if there's an emergency or a situation that the student needs assistance, we are immediately able to help them out. We have obviously had cases in the past where a student has inadvertently lost their important documents such as passport. We make sure that staff or the lead teacher is securing the important documents such as passports at all points in time, unless they are being used by the student to go through immigration or to board an aircraft, for example. We've had cases in the past where students had incorrect visas, even though we had advised them to get the correct kind of visa. We also discuss, with the school in advance what happened in the case there's a flight cancellation or if a student falls sick, how we will support them and take them, to a doctor or a hospital in a situation. Post-trip, my team and I work with the school for two kinds of feedback. One is an operations feedback form that is given just before their return flight. This is given to the lead teacher, and we also give trip and experience review link. Both of these kinds of feedback help us as a company to service your school better, and also for future trips with your school or with other schools, we take this feedback very, very seriously. We have had some amazing feedback, and it's only because we did the right things after we received some challenging feedback that gave us very honest advice on what to improve. This can be with regard to activities, food, cultural suitability of activities for kids from the Middle East and North Africa region. So all of these are important areas that we like to collect feedback on. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. We have trips from all the way from Australia to Japan, all of Asia, Europe, and North America. So if you have any trips that you'd like to discuss, especially because we're in the Middle East, we're spoiled for choice a lot of times with flight connectivity, I'm happy to talk to you about what options you might have and where you'd like to go. These are my details. Thank you again for listening, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.